Hello, coming to you from the holy city of Great Plains board gaming, Omaha, Nebraska. Welcome to the Out of the Dust podcast. I'm your host, Honest Bryce Dirty. An Out of the Dust board game is a game that gets played that you hadn't previously played in a year or more. In other words, it's been a while since you last played it. But why did the game get dusty? Why did you decide to dust it off? How does the game compare to how you remembered it? Are you likely to play it more often in the future? These are the questions that we're interested in examining on Out of the Dust. In case you're tuning in for the first time, I'm the moderator of the Out of the Dust Geek List on Board Game Geek. The Out of the Dust Geek List is one of the recurring monthly geek lists on the site, joining other such popular ones like Favorite New to Be of the Month, New to Me a Year Ago, and Games Only I Played. The main focus of this podcast is highlighting some of the Out of the Dust games that I and other contributors to the Geek List have been playing. There are a few other short segments on this podcast as well, sometimes unrelated and sometimes tied in with an Out of the Dust perspective.
Oh gosh, I'm the president of
Let's hit the Out of the Dust segment first. My sons and I do a monthly kid and family-friendly demo at Spielbound, Omaha's local board game cafe. After our demo, we usually hang around for a little while longer and play some of the games from their 2,400 game library. At our last visit, the boys picked out a game called Orders Up to play. Published by GameRight in 2010, it's one of just a few designs by designer Miles Christensen. It's a distinctive GameRight game because it comes in a normal-sized, Agricola-sized box instead of their typically small-footprint packaging. It's a set collection speed game as players are waiters trying to fill a customer order first with food tiles. The funny thing is that when we played it recently, I had no idea I was playing an Out of the Dust game until I logged my play and saw that I already had a play logged. But evidently, it had been 3 years, 5 months, and 16 days since I last played it. I had totally forgotten this game and remembered absolutely nothing about it. Evidently, it didn't make much of an impression on me 3 years ago. But it was a fun time this go-around. It's a pretty random game as players only collect a tile when a die roll tells them to. The main way is when a bell side is rolled and then the player who first rings the bell included with the game collects a tile of their choice from the display. But ringing the bell first is oddly satisfying. The boys love this mechanic. A few days later, one of the local schools in town, Beals Elementary, reached out to Spielbound to request assistance in running a 2-day board game club as part of their summer school. My boys and I volunteered to help, and we put together a package of games for them to use. And remembering the fun we'd just had with Orders Up, we included that in the package as well. Turns out, that was one of the hits of the board game club and was played non-stop both days. There was constant bell ringing going on and lots of laughter being had. Now, this is a pretty obscure game, having less than 250 lifetime log plays on BGG, but the Spielbound copy is well loved and starting to show signs of considerable wear, which my boys definitely plan on contributing to in the future. This is not likely to become dusty again anytime soon for me. In fact, the boys have already played it again. I took them to the cafe again recently and let them play whatever they wanted while I ran a Gonshon Clever demo. Orders Up was the first game they selected to play by themselves, and they played it most of the time we were there. Let's see now what other contributors to the Geek List have brought Out of the Dust. David Fox, BGG user Quaid, recently brought Ice Cool Out of the Dust. He last played it 1 year, 1 month, and 22 days ago, and currently rates it a 6. He writes, "My son is finally reaching the stage where he will actually play games by the rules. I suspect a lot of people out there can sympathize to a degree. But James, bless him, has spent a good proportion of his 7 years ignoring the rules in the box almost from the moment we opened the game for the first time. So it was a pleasant change of pace to actually play Ice Cool by the proper rules, and to be beaten fair and square as I drew all 2s to his 3-value scorecards. A bit swinging as a 2-player, but still penguin weeble-flicking goodness." Thanks for the contribution, David. I had a chance to learn Ice Cool myself at PretzCon just a couple months ago. I'm hoping to add it to my collection when the opportunity presents itself. It's a great family game. Reaction segment time! What I'd like to react to this time is Origins, which is just wrapped up. I have several friends attending, which I'm totally jealous of. I've got to take a break from the big conventions this year to save some money, which is a very boring thing to do. But I attended last year and it was fantastic. I worked in the Eagle Griffin booth, ran most of the Railways of Nippon demos, and got to meet Vital Lacerda, who was there giving memorable epic demos of Lisboa. I also got connected with the major publisher through the designer-publisher speed dating event. And they will be releasing my first game in a couple of years, something I will talk more about in future episodes when there is more information to share. Overall, I think I like Origins better than Gen Con, which may have gotten too big to be consistently fun for me. I'm not sure if Origins is a big con that feels like a small con, or vice versa, but either way it has a unique feeling to it that is very attractive. My least favorite part of Gen Con are the cosplayers. Except for Steampunk Santa, that guy is awesome. But in general, cosplayers just get in the way. It is so hard moving around in a massive crowd that is held up by people taking pictures of posing cosplayers. I wish Gen Con limited their presence to just the parade, which is admittedly quite the spectacle. But that wasn't a problem at Origins, where there was a very small and hardly noticeable cosplayer presence. Okay, sorry for the anti-cosplayer tangent there. Back to Origins. This year, my friend Chad is going to pick up the Century Eastern Wonders mat and get it signed for me. It's interesting to note that there's really not much coming out at Origins this year. Eastern Wonders is probably the biggest release. Speaking of Eastern Wonders, let me make a prediction that I've been saying for a while now. Yes, there will be a Golem edition of this. Despite Plan B's protestations and denial that any such thing will happen, this will happen! There's no reason to take anything Plan B says at face value, since they've already reversed their earlier promise that there would be no Golem edition of Spice Road. In fact, Plan B recently admitted in a Facebook post that they were indeed evaluating whether a Golem edition of Eastern Wonders would be viable. Let me tell you, they're going to find that yes, it is viable and make it happen. You heard it here first. Bryce predicts that by the end of the year, Plan B will officially announce the Golem edition of Eastern Wonders. And then, you can add Prophet Bryce to the list of things people call me. One more reaction to Origins. I love that BGG and Dice Tower do live streams of some of the stuff they do at Origins. Listening to all those publishers talk about their games makes me feel a little like I'm there, and I'm thankful for that. The live question and answer chat room that Dice Tower did was especially cool. I have this forlorn hope that WizKids will someday resurrect Star Trek Expeditions, which is a brilliant game that maybe feels more like Star Trek than any other game, and is a crime that it was never supported by any additional mission content! Dice Tower read my question of if they have any plans to bring back the game with additional content live to Zev, and for a moment, it sounded like he was genuinely considering the possibility. But then he replied simply no, and further dashed my hopes to pieces. Let's turn now to the What Have I Been Playing segment. We have a recurring monthly demo going at Spielbound called Splatter Saturday. Every other month I demo a different Splatter game, except for Roads and Boats, which I don't care for. But so far I've done Antiquity and Great Zimbabwe, and I've got Indonesia planned for next time. And then, in the alternating months, either my friend Andrew, or I do a demo of Food Chain Magnate. Since it's so awesome, it gets slotted in most. We schedule an introductory game at noon and then follow it up with an experience game at 2. Now, most of the times, experienced gamers can get away with ignoring the so-called introductory mode of a game. The Food Chain Magnate is one of the few games out there I recommend that even experienced gamers play the introductory game of first. It's a heavy and very complex game. But like other Splatter games, it's not necessarily complex in the individual mechanics, but in how those mechanics combine to create a process of some sort to get from one point to another. In a typical board game, you need to figure out how to get from point A to B, or maybe from point A to B to C. But in Food Chain Magnate, you need to figure out how to get from point A to about point J or so. Each point along that process isn't necessarily complex, but understanding how each point interacts with the others and contributes to the process may appear daunting and overwhelming at first. Which is why the introductory mode in the game is so useful and beneficial for new players in understanding just how exactly money is made. Where a typical board game might call for a player to gather resources for a pizza, make the pizza, and then sell the pizza for money, In Food Chain Magnate, you need to strategically place a restaurant in the town to cater to potential patrons, improve the quality of the neighborhood to create better paying customers, market advertising to those patrons to create a demand for your pizza, create space in your employee structure to handle operations, hire an employee to make the pizza, train the employee to make the pizza, actually make the pizza, pay your employees, price your pizza competitively to attract customers, and only then sell the pizza and make money. Since the ultimate objective of any game, Food Chain Magnate included, is to have fun, going into a full standard game without any knowledge of this integral process tends to lead to the opposite of having fun. Surprisingly, we didn't have anyone show up for an introductory game demo at our latest Splatter Saturday, which was the first time that's happened. But my friend Aaron was there and he'd played before, so we did a full 2-player game instead. Sometimes the results of Food Chain Magnate can be a disproportionate money total at the end amongst the players. But not this time. Aaron was slightly ahead going into what we knew would be the final round, and it was anyone's game. I was feeling pretty good since I'd made more money in the previous round, and was expecting my pop dominance to fuel my victory in the final round. I knew Aaron was banking on getting many discounted sales in the final round, and he knew I was banking on getting a few big buck luxury sales in the final round. There's something savagely satisfying about charging a customer $45 for a pop at my burger joint just because they have a garden in their yard. Anyway, what I wasn't expecting was Aaron's ability to suddenly produce just a few more pops than I was expecting and steal away some of the customers I was counting on. I only made one sale in the final round, but it was a massive one, $135 from a single house. And this was almost as much as Aaron made from all the other houses combined. But his CEO bonus put him over the top and clinched the victory for him. Let's turn now to the obscure Bryce game segment. Festival of Thousand Cats. Originally released in Japan by publisher Fukurao Dao and designer Fukutaro in 2016, it was only recently made more widely available by publisher The Wood Games, who I've never heard of before. This game has definitely flown under the radar and has been hard to come by for those who have been seeking it out. I first became aware of it from the Tokyo Games Expo preview that BGG puts together each year, and it only stuck to me because I'm a cat guy. I love cats! I put it on my BGG wishlist, not really expecting to ever come across it, but was pleasantly surprised to see it on the Fun Again Going Out of Business sale list that they had earlier in the year, and snatched a copy up. Turns out this is a really weird and unusual trick-taking game. There are 4 suits in the game, and each one has a slight variance in the numbers represented, all illustrated with sake-drinking cats, by the way. Each round, there are 2 cards in the public display, and players can't play whatever suits those happen to be. Of the remaining suits in the hand, each player selects 1 card and simultaneously reveals it. The highest number played gets to trade their played card with one of the public display cards. Then the lowest number played trades their played card with the other one. The other 1 or 2 players in the game must keep their played card. All of these played cards go into a player score pile, and the 2 traded cards become the new public display cards for the next round. Where the game gets really interesting is that some of the cards have a point-scoring fish icon, some have a point-losing crow icon, and some have a score extra points, but only if you don't get too many, booze icon. The perfect amount of booze will score extra points, but if a player gets too many, they lose points by throwing up half of their fish points. A round ends when each player is out of cards, points are tallied, and play continues with additional rounds until someone reaches a target point level. Points can vary widely between just a couple to 10 or more, depending on how well players have tactically played their cards. Because sometimes it's desirable to try to win a trick, and sometimes to try to lose it, and oftentimes to try to finish in the middle and keep your played card. And that's what makes this such a particularly interesting trick-taking game. I mentioned in the last episode how before I got into CCGs, I was a card player. Well, those card games mostly consisted of hearts and spades. So I have a nostalgic love of trick-taking games, and every time I encounter a new one that does something new and interesting, it really pleases me. So keep an eye out for this obscure game. Hopefully it will become less